The sun was setting over Manhattan's skyscrapers, casting a golden glow on the windows of the luxurious penthouse apartment where Olivia Sinclair, a 32-year-old woman with wavy brown hair and piercing green eyes, gazed out at the city that never sleeps. Her fingers absent-mindedly stroked the pearl necklace her late uncle, the real estate magnate Theodore Sinclair, had given her on her last birthday. Silent tears welled in her eyes as she remembered the man who had been her only family since her parents died in a tragic plane crash when she was just 12 years old. Theodore Sinclair was known for his sharp business acumen and generous heart. He had raised Olivia as if she were his own daughter, providing her with a first-class education and a life of privilege. However, he had also taught her the value of hard work and compassion. Olivia grew into an intelligent, determined, and kind-hearted woman, qualities her uncle had always admired. When Theodore suddenly passed away from a heart attack 6 months ago, Olivia found herself alone in the world once again, the heiress to a fortune estimated at hundreds of millions of dollars. The days following Theodore's death were a blur of grief, meetings with lawyers, and the sudden realization that she was now responsible for an empire. Olivia felt the weight of her uncle's legacy on her shoulders, but also a profound loneliness that threatened to consume her. It was in this moment of vulnerability that fate, or perhaps opportunism, brought Ethan Blackwood into her life. Ethan was everything a woman could desire: tall, broad-shouldered, with wavy black hair and hypnotic blue eyes. His charming smile and magnetic personality captivated Olivia from the very first moment they met at a charity event. He introduced himself as a successful entrepreneur in the tech industry, but what truly caught Olivia's attention was his apparent understanding of her pain and loneliness. Ethan seemed to know exactly what to say and how to act to comfort her, filling the void her uncle's death had left behind. Their romance was intense and fast-paced. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Ethan took her on romantic dinners, surprised her with extravagant gifts, and made her feel loved like never before. Olivia, who had always been cautious when it came to matters of the heart, found herself completely swept up in the overwhelming passion she felt. She believed she had found not just a lover, but a partner, someone who could help her navigate her new reality as one of the wealthiest women in New York. When Ethan proposed just 3 months after they met, Olivia didn't hesitate. The diamond ring on her finger seemed to seal not only their love, but also the end of her loneliness. The wedding was a luxurious yet intimate ceremony held at the Sinclair estate in the Hamptons. Olivia radiated happiness in her designer wedding gown, while Ethan, elegant in his tuxedo, smiled with a gleam in his eyes that she interpreted as love, but which concealed something far more sinister. The first few months of marriage felt like a dream. Ethan seemed like the perfect husband, attentive, passionate, and always ready to support her in decisions regarding the family business. However, small changes began to emerge. Ethan started spending more time away from home, citing business meetings and work trips. When he was home, he often received mysterious phone calls, stepping out of the room to speak in private. Olivia tried to push aside the doubts creeping into her mind. She convinced herself she was being paranoid, that the stress of managing the Sinclair empire was clouding her judgment. But a persistent voice in the back of her mind warned her that something wasn't right. It was on a rainy autumn night that Olivia's world completely shattered. She had returned early from a business trip, eager to surprise Ethan. As she quietly entered the apartment, she heard sounds coming from the master bedroom. Her heart pounded when she recognized Ethan's voice, but then froze when she realized he wasn't alone. With trembling hands, Olivia slowly pushed the bedroom door open, and the sight before her left her in shock. Ethan was in bed with a woman Olivia immediately recognized as Sophia, her personal assistant. The two were so caught up in their passion that they didn't notice Olivia at first. When they finally saw her, Ethan's face showed no remorse, only irritation at having been caught. Sophia, on the other hand, flashed a malicious smile that made it clear this wasn't a one-time betrayal. The words that followed felt like knives to Olivia's heart. Ethan, coldly and without hesitation, revealed that their marriage had been a sham from the start. He and Sophia had planned everything, preying on Olivia when she was most vulnerable, gaining her trust and ultimately seizing control of her fortune. The love Olivia had believed was real had been nothing more than an elaborate performance. Devastated and humiliated, Olivia fled the apartment, tears blurring her vision as she ran to the elevator. The rain poured mercilessly as she stepped onto the street, mixing with her tears. Without thinking, she got into her luxury car and sped through the wet streets of New York, her heart shattered and her mind in turmoil. It was in this state of profound anguish that fate intervened in Olivia's life once again. On a sharp curve, her car skidded on the slick pavement. She tried to regain control, but it was too late. The vehicle spun violently before crashing into a tree at the roadside. The impact was brutal, leaving Olivia unconscious, trapped in the wreckage of what had once been a symbol of her wealth, but had now become a deadly prison. By the time paramedics managed to pull her from the twisted metal, Olivia was on the brink of death. Her journey was only beginning, a journey that would take her from the heights of luxury to the depths of despair before she could rise again, transformed by adversity and driven by an unrelenting desire for justice. The monotonous, rhythmic sound of monitoring machines echoed through the sterile hallways of New York Presbyterian Hospital. In the intensive care unit, Olivia Sinclair lay unconscious, her fragile body connected to a myriad of tubes and wires. Doctors moved around her with grave expressions, exchanging worried glances as they examined her test results. The diagnosis was grim. Severe head trauma, multiple fractures, and most concerning of all, signs of extensive brain damage. The medical team braced for a long battle, uncertain if their patient would ever wake from the deep coma she had fallen into. While Olivia silently fought for her life, the outside world continued to spin, oblivious to the personal tragedy unfolding within the hospital walls. In the luxurious penthouse she once called home, Ethan Blackwood and Sophia Martinez celebrated the success of their nefarious plan. Champagne flowed freely as they toasted their cunning and Olivia's gullibility. Ethan, a cold smile on his lips, was already making moves on the financial chessboard, discreetly transferring large sums of money to offshore accounts. Sophia, meanwhile, combed through Olivia's personal files, searching for any information that could further solidify their control over the Sinclair empire. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. News of Olivia's accident had been carefully suppressed by Ethan's influence and wealth. To the outside world, Olivia Sinclair was away on an extended business trip, unreachable due to the delicate nature of the transactions she was supposedly handling. Ethan played the role of a concerned husband to perfection, making occasional appearances at the hospital to maintain appearances, always careful not to reveal any sign of his true nature to the doctors and nurses caring for Olivia. It was during one of these performative visits that fate once again intervened in Olivia's life. As Ethan spoke with the doctors in the hallway, coldly discussing the possibility of pulling the plug if there was no improvement, something extraordinary happened inside Olivia's room. Her fingers twitched slightly, an almost imperceptible movement, but one that did not go unnoticed by the attending nurse. In the days that followed, other signs of consciousness began to emerge. A flutter of her eyelids, a faint squeeze of a hand that held hers. The medical team remained cautiously optimistic, but Ethan received the news with a mix of frustration and concern. As Olivia slowly emerged from the depths of her coma, it became clear that the accident had left deep scars. When she finally opened her eyes weeks later, her gaze was empty, devoid of the brightness and vitality that once defined her. After a series of tests, the doctors came to an alarming conclusion. Olivia suffered from severe retrograde amnesia. Her memories, her identity, her entire life before the accident had been wiped away, leaving only a confusing and terrifying void. Ethan saw this as a golden opportunity. With an Oscar-worthy performance, he introduced himself to Olivia as her devoted and loving husband, weaving a web of lies about their past together. He told her fabricated stories of their romance, invented memories of happy moments that had never existed. Vulnerable and disoriented, Olivia clung to these false memories like a drowning woman grasping a piece of driftwood in the open sea. However, as days passed and Olivia's physical recovery progressed, Something deep within her refused to fully accept Ethan's narrative. It was the little things, the way he avoided certain topics, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes when he spoke of his supposed love for her. These small inconsistencies planted seeds of doubt in her subconscious, though she was not yet capable of understanding what they meant. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Ethan and Sophia worked tirelessly to cement their control over Olivia's fortune. Documents were forged, signatures faked, and a complex web of financial transactions was constructed to conceal the massive embezzlement of funds. They knew they were racing against time. The more Olivia regained her memory, the greater the risk of their plan unraveling. At this critical juncture, Ethan made a decision that would seal the fate of everyone involved. On a dark and stormy night, he convinced the doctors to discharge Olivia, arguing that the familiar environment of home would be more beneficial to her recovery. With cold, calculated efficiency, Ethan and Sophia executed the final phase of their diabolical plan. Instead of taking her home, they drove Olivia, still weak and confused, to the city's decaying outskirts. Under the cover of darkness, they stopped near an abandoned landfill on the outskirts of Queens. With a cruelty that starkly contrasted with the mask of concern he had worn, Ethan pulled Olivia out of the car. She, unable to comprehend what was happening, looked at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Ethan said with a cold smile, "but this is the end of the road for you." With those words, he shoved her roughly onto the muddy ground of the landfill. Olivia collapsed, her body too frail to resist. Tears of pain and bewilderment streamed down her face as she watched, stunned, as Ethan and Sophia got back into the car. The roar of the engine fading into the distance was the last sound Olivia heard before exhaustion and shock claimed her once again. There, abandoned among the debris and filth, drenched by the relentless rain, lay the once powerful heiress of the Sinclair Empire. Her bruised body and shattered mind were all that remained of her former life of luxury and privilege. Hours passed, and the sky began to lighten with the first rays of dawn when a solitary figure emerged from the morning mist. It was Rosa Mendez, a middle-aged woman who survived by collecting recyclable materials from the landfill. Her weary eyes, accustomed to sifting through discarded scraps in search of something of value, widened at the sight of Olivia's motionless body. Rosa approached cautiously, fearing the worst. To her relief, she realized the woman was still breathing, though barely. Without hesitation, Rosa removed her worn-out coat and covered Olivia, shielding her from the biting morning cold. With a strength that belied her frail appearance, she managed to lift Olivia and, step by step, carried her to her humble shack near the landfill. Rosa's small home was simple but clean and welcoming. With maternal care, she cleaned Olivia's wounds, changed her soaked clothes for dry, albeit tattered garments, and laid her on her only bed. As she tended to the mysterious woman, Rosa couldn't help but think of her own daughter, Marisol, who had died years earlier, a victim of street violence. The resemblance between Olivia and Marisol was striking, and Rosa felt an immediate connection to the stranger fate had placed in her path. In the days that followed, Rosa cared for Olivia with unwavering dedication. She used what little she had to buy medicine and nutritious food, sacrificing her own comfort for the stranger's well-being. Slowly, Olivia began to regain her physical strength, though her mind remained a labyrinth of confusion and fragmented memories. When she was finally able to speak, Olivia discovered that she couldn't remember anything about her past life. Her own name was a mystery. Moved by an inexplicable impulse, Rosa began calling her Marisol, the name of her lost daughter. Olivia, or Marisol as she was now known, accepted the name with gratitude, clinging to this new identity as her only anchor in a world she did not understand. As days turned into weeks, Marisol adapted to her new reality. Rosa taught her the trade of recycling, showing her how to sort materials, identify valuable items, and negotiate with local buyers. The work was grueling and the conditions were harsh, but Marisol found a strange peace in this simple new life. Her hands, once accustomed to the smooth touch of fine fabrics and expensive jewelry, now grew calloused from daily manual labor. But deep inside, something was stirring. Faint memories began to surface, flashes of jewelry's glimmer, the sound of laughter at an elegant party, the scent of expensive perfume. Then one night she found an old newspaper with a picture of herself alongside Ethan at a gala. In that moment, as if a dam had burst, everything came flooding back. Olivia Sinclair had returned. And with her, an unrelenting fury and a burning thirst for vengeance. The game had changed. And this time, Olivia was determined to be the one who won. Dawn in New York brought with it a frenetic energy, the streets quickly filling with hurried pedestrians and the constant movement of vehicles. However, in a small shack on the fringes of society, a silent revolution was about to begin. Olivia Sinclair, now fully aware of her identity and the terrible fate that had been forced upon her, stared at her reflection in a broken piece of mirror. Her eyes, once filled with innocence and trust, now burned with fierce determination and hard-earned wisdom. The marks left by months of grueling labor in the landfill stood in stark contrast to the memory of her former life of luxury, serving as a constant reminder of how much she had lost and how much she still had to reclaim. Rosa Mendez watched Olivia with a mixture of maternal pride and apprehension. In the past few days since the shocking revelation of Marisol's true identity, Rosa had witnessed an extraordinary transformation in the woman she had rescued and cared for. The sweetness and vulnerability that had once defined Marisol had been replaced by an almost palpable intensity in Olivia. Rosa knew she was standing before a force of nature ready to be unleashed, and though she feared what was to come, she was determined to support Olivia in her quest for justice. "Mija," Rosa said gently, using the affectionate Spanish term she had grown accustomed to calling Marisol. "What do you plan to do now?" Olivia turned slowly, a small smile forming on her lips. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes, cold, calculated. "First, Rosa, I'm going to take back what's rightfully mine. Then I'll make Ethan and Sophia pay for every second of suffering they put me through." Her voice was calm, but it carried an intensity that made Rosa involuntarily shiver. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Using the limited resources at her disposal, Olivia began weaving an intricate web of information and contacts. She knew she couldn't simply reappear and reclaim her old life. Ethan and Sophia would have taken precautions to protect their deception. She had to be smarter, more patient, and above all, more ruthless than her enemies. Her first move was to discreetly reach out to Janice, her former housekeeper and one of the few people she had ever truly trusted. Using a public phone and disguising her voice, Olivia arranged a secret meeting with Janice at a busy cafe in the city center. Their reunion was emotional, filled with quiet tears. Janice, who had always suspected something terrible had happened, to Olivia, was relieved to see her alive but horrified by her story. With Janice's help, Olivia began piecing together the puzzle of her stolen life. She discovered that Ethan and Sophia had been meticulous in their takeover, altering documents, manipulating bank accounts, and even bribing key employees at Sinclair Enterprises. The depth of their betrayal was even greater than Olivia had initially imagined, only fueling her determination to seek justice. Meanwhile, in Manhattan's corporate world, Ethan Blackwood was navigating increasingly turbulent waters. The reckless and greedy decisions he and Sophia had made were beginning to catch up with them. Dissatisfied shareholders, suspicious business partners, and a quiet investigation by the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, were slowly closing in on the couple. Sophia, consumed by paranoia, began pressuring Ethan to take the money they had amassed and disappear. "We have more than enough," she insisted during a heated argument in their penthouse. "We could go to the Cayman Islands or maybe Switzerland, anywhere but here." Ethan, however, was reluctant to let go of the power and prestige he had acquired. The same ambition that had once united them in their sinister plan was now threatening to tear them apart. It was in this moment of vulnerability that Olivia decided to make her next move. Using the information Janice had provided and her own sharp instincts honed by months of survival, she began planting seeds of doubt and distrust among Ethan's closest associates. Carefully orchestrated rumors about questionable transactions and potential embezzlement started circulating within the halls of Sinclair Enterprises. Olivia's boldest strike came in the form of an anonymous email sent to several board members. The email contained undeniable proof of some of Ethan and Sophia's illegal activities, carefully edited to conceal the source of the information. The chaos that followed was exactly what Olivia had anticipated. The board called an emergency meeting, and suddenly, Ethan found himself struggling to maintain the control he had once believed was unshakable. As the corporate storm brewed, Olivia moved on to the next phase of her personal vendetta. With Rosa's help, she began transforming herself physically. Cheap hair dye, colored contact lenses, and carefully chosen thrift store clothing created a new persona. Amanda Green, an ambitious executive assistant new to New York. Under this new identity, Olivia secured a low-level job at Sinclair Enterprises, blending in unnoticed among the many anonymous faces that filled the lower floors of the corporate skyscraper. Day by day, she watched, listened, and gathered information, always looking for the perfect opportunity to get close to Ethan and Sophia without arousing suspicion. Then, one seemingly ordinary day, fate handed Olivia the opportunity she had been waiting for. A broken elevator forced Ethan to use the service lift, the same one Olivia, in her disguise as Amanda, regularly used. As the doors closed, leaving them alone in the confined space, Olivia felt her heart pound. There he was, the man who had destroyed her life, standing less than a foot away, completely unaware of her true identity. Ethan, distracted by his phone, barely noticed the assistant beside him. Olivia, however, absorbed every detail. The familiar scent of his expensive cologne, the nervous twitch in his left eye that always appeared when he was under stress, the wedding band he still wore, a cruel reminder of his betrayal. It took every ounce of self-control for Olivia not to confront him then and there, not to scream all the truths that had been burning inside her for months. As the elevator slowly ascended, Olivia allowed herself a small smile. This chance encounter wasn't just a test of her patience, it was a promise that no matter how high Ethan had climbed, she would be there to drag him back down into the reality he so desperately sought to escape. The game had only just begun, and Olivia was determined to be the last one standing when the dust finally settled. When the elevator doors opened, Ethan hurried out, not sparing a second glance. Olivia, however, knew that this brief moment had changed everything. Being so close to her enemy had not awakened fear or hesitation. It had solidified her resolve. She now knew, with absolute certainty, that she was capable of facing Ethan and Sophia on their own turf. As she returned to her desk, Olivia began mapping out the next phase of her plan. She knew she had to be patient, meticulous, and above all, ruthless. The revenge she sought was not just for the stolen fortune or the lost status. It was for her dignity, her identity, and for every person Ethan and Sophia had trampled in their relentless pursuit of power and wealth. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the foundations of New York's corporate world and redefine the meaning of justice for Olivia Sinclair. The transformation was complete. From naive heiress to relentless strategist, Olivia was ready to reclaim not only what was rightfully hers, but also to forge a new destiny from the ashes of her old life. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months as Olivia, under the guise of Amanda Green, infiltrated deeper into the structure of Sinclair Enterprises. Her exemplary performance and apparent devotion to her work did not go unnoticed, and soon, she found herself promoted to positions of greater responsibility. Each step up the corporate ladder brought her closer to her ultimate goal, but also increased the risk of discovery. During this time, Olivia faced not only the external challenges of her mission, but also an intense internal battle. Her nights were often filled with vivid nightmares, forcing her to relive the moment of her betrayal and abandonment. She would wake up drenched in cold sweat, her heart pounding violently in her chest, struggling to distinguish between the cruel reality of her past and the fierce determination of her present. In those moments of vulnerability, it was the memory of Rosa and her unconditional kindness that anchored her, reminding her that even in the darkest moments, there was still light. In her small rented apartment, far from the luxury she was once, Accustomed to, Olivia spent hours refining her plan. Mental maps covered the walls, connecting people, events, and financial transactions in a complex web of corruption and deceit. She knew that taking down Ethan and Sophia would require not only undeniable proof of their crimes, but also strategic allies inside and outside the company. One of those allies emerged in the form of Marcus Donovan, a veteran financial analyst at Sinclair Enterprises who had always been skeptical of Ethan's meteoric rise. Marcus, with his unshakable integrity and sharp eye for numbers, had noticed discrepancies in the company's accounts that others conveniently ignored. Recognizing him as a potential asset, Olivia carefully cultivated a professional friendship. It was during a casual lunch with Marcus that Olivia found her first real opening. Between bites of salad and seemingly innocuous conversation, she skillfully steered the discussion toward the rumors of financial irregularities within the company. Marcus, usually reserved, let slip his frustration with the lack of transparency in Ethan's management. "Something's not right, Amanda," he admitted in a hushed voice, glancing around nervously. "The numbers just don't add up, and whenever I try to dig deeper, I hit a wall at every turn." Olivia saw the opportunity she had been waiting for. With meticulous care, she began to share some of her own observations, presenting them as the concerns of a dedicated employee. With each subsequent meeting, she and Marcus exchanged more information, gradually compiling a damning dossier against Ethan and Sophia. Meanwhile, at the top of the corporate pyramid, tensions between Ethan and Sophia had reached a breaking point. The mounting pressure from both internal and external investigations was taking its toll. Sophia, always the more cautious of the two, insisted more frequently that they should take the money and run while they still could. Ethan, however, clung stubbornly to the power and prestige he had fought to seize, refusing to accept that his empire was crumbling around him. During one of these heated arguments, Olivia, working late as the ever-dedicated Amanda Green, managed to capture an incriminating conversation. Hidden behind a pillar in the nearly empty office, she recorded Ethan and Sophia explicitly discussing their crimes, from their initial manipulation of Olivia to the elaborate schemes they had devised to siphon company funds. That recording was the final piece of the puzzle, the irrefutable proof she needed to expose the truth. With the evidence in hand, Olivia knew the time to act was near, yet she hesitated, not out of fear or doubt, but because she realized her journey had become about something far greater than personal revenge. Over the months working at the lower levels of the company, she had seen firsthand the devastating impact of Ethan and Sophia's greed and corruption. Families struggling to survive on stagnant wages, benefits slashed, and the constant threat of mass layoffs hanging over employees' heads. At that moment, alone in her small apartment, staring at the evidence of months of hard work, Olivia had an epiphany. Her revenge could no longer be just about punishing Ethan and Sophia. It had to be about restoring the integrity of the company her uncle had built with so much love and dedication. It had to be about protecting the livelihoods of the hundreds of innocent employees who depended on Sinclair Enterprises to support their families. With this new perspective, Olivia began reshaping her plan. She didn't just want to expose Ethan and Sophia's crimes, she wanted to rebuild the company on stronger, more ethical foundations. That meant not only removing the corrupt elements, but also implementing structural changes to prevent future abuses. In the days that followed, Olivia worked tirelessly, sleeping only a few hours each night. She refined her strategy, prepared documents, and built a network of trusted allies within the company. Marcus Donovan became her right-hand man in this operation, his experience and insider knowledge proving invaluable. The tension reached its peak during Sinclair Enterprises' annual board meeting. Sensing he was losing control, Ethan planned to use the meeting to consolidate his power, proposing a series of draconian measures that would give him absolute control over the company. What he didn't know was that Olivia and her allies were ready to launch their counterattack. When Ethan finished his presentation, filled with half-truths and skillful financial manipulations, there was a moment of tense silence in the boardroom. That was when Olivia, still disguised as Amanda Green, requested permission to speak. With her heart pounding but her voice steady, she methodically dismantled each of Ethan's claims, presenting meticulously collected evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. The shock in the room was palpable. Ethan, initially dismissive, quickly turned pale as Olivia continued her exposé. Sophia, seated beside him, looked as if she was about to faint. The board members sat in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from disbelief to growing fury. Then, at the height of her presentation, Olivia made her final move. Removing the wig and contact lenses that had been part of her disguise for so long, she revealed herself to the board. "My name is Olivia Sinclair," she declared, her voice ringing through the silent room. "And I am here to take back what is rightfully mine, and to restore the integrity of this company." The chaos that followed was indescribable. Ethan, in a desperate last attempt, tried to flee the room, only to be stopped by security guards Olivia had strategically positioned. Sophia collapsed in her chair, all pretense of strength abandoning her in the face of her inevitable downfall. In the hours and days that followed, the full truth came to light. The media had a field day with the story of the heiress left for dead who returned to reclaim her empire. Armed with Olivia's evidence, authorities moved swiftly to arrest Ethan, Sophia, and their accomplices. For Olivia, however, this was not the end. It was only the beginning. She knew she now faced the monumental task of not only rebuilding the company, but also rebuilding her own life. The scars of her experience ran deep, but they had also forged in her a strength and wisdom she never imagined she possessed. As she prepared for her first press conference as the reinstated CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, Olivia reflected on her journey. From a naive heiress to a hardened survivor, and now to a determined leader with the power to make a difference. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it head-on, with Rosa, her moral anchor, by her side, and the memory of her uncle as her guiding light. The revenge she had once sought had transformed into something much greater, a mission of redemption, not just for herself but for all those who depended on Sinclair Enterprises. And in that mission, Olivia was determined not to fail. The conference hall of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan was packed with journalists, executives, and onlookers, all eager to witness what promised to be one of the most dramatic press conferences in recent corporate history. The buzz of conversation abruptly ceased as Olivia Sinclair entered the room, commanding immediate attention. Dressed in an elegant yet conservative suit, a stark contrast to the simple clothes she had worn in the past few months, Olivia exuded an aura of confidence and determination that silenced even the most skeptical reporters. As she walked to the podium, Olivia felt the weight of every gaze upon her. Each pair of eyes in the room carried a question, an expectation, a doubt. For a brief moment, she felt a wave of anxiety threaten to take hold. But then, her eyes found Rosa, seated discreetly in the front row, her gaze radiating strength and unwavering support. With a slight nod to her savior and friend, Olivia took a deep breath and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," her firm voice echoed through the microphones, "my name is Olivia Sinclair, and I stand before you today not only to reclaim my rightful place as the CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, but to share with you a story of betrayal, survival, and above all, redemption." A palpable silence settled over the room as Olivia began recounting her odyssey, from her fraudulent marriage to Ethan, to her fight for survival in the landfill, and her eventual infiltration of the company. As Olivia detailed Ethan and Sophia's crimes, presenting meticulously gathered evidence, reactions across the room ranged from shock to outrage. Journalists typed furiously on their laptops, while executives exchanged uneasy glances, no doubt questioning their past associations with the fraudsters. However, it was when Olivia began speaking about the future of Sinclair Enterprises that the atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. "What happened to me," she declared with passion, "was not just a personal tragedy. It was a symptom of a much larger disease that plagues many corporations today: unchecked greed and a lack of social responsibility." Her voice trembled, slightly with restrained emotion as she continued, "But where others might see only destruction, I see an opportunity to rebuild, not just this company, but to redefine what it means to be an ethical and responsible corporation in the 21st century. Olivia then laid out her vision for Sinclair Enterprises: a renewed commitment to ethical business practices, significant investments in employee welfare programs, and an ambitious initiative to make the company a leader in environmental sustainability. Each proposal was bold, challenging the status quo of the corporate world, yet presented with such clarity and conviction that even the most hardened skeptics in the room couldn't look away. As Olivia spoke, a palpable energy began to build in the room. The journalists, initially wary, now leaned forward in their seats, hanging on to every word. The executives present, many of whom had come expecting to witness the downfall of Sinclair Enterprises, were now glimpsing the birth of something revolutionary. It was in this moment of growing optimism that fate decided to throw its final challenge. The doors to the conference hall burst open violently, and Ethan Blackwood, handcuffed and flanked by police officers, was dragged inside. His appearance was a grotesque reflection of the once polished and confident man he had been. Disheveled hair, bloodshot eyes, and a desperate fury twisting his features. "This is all lies," he shouted, his voice hoarse with rage. "She's manipulating. All of you, just like I manipulated her." Chaos erupted in the room. Journalists jumped from their seats, cameras flashing wildly. Security moved swiftly to contain the situation, but Olivia remained unshaken at the podium, her eyes fixed on Ethan with a mixture of pity and unwavering resolve. As Ethan's shouting finally subsided, a tense silence filled the room. All eyes turned back to Olivia, waiting to see how she would respond to this dramatic interruption. With a calmness that surprised even herself, Olivia addressed Ethan directly. "You're right about one thing, Ethan. There was manipulation." She let the words hang in the air before continuing. "But the difference between us is that while you manipulated to destroy, I am here to rebuild." Turning back to the audience, she resumed in a clear and steady voice. "What you just witnessed is a stark reminder of what we are up against. Greed, selfishness, and a complete lack of ethics nearly destroyed this company. But that is precisely why our mission is so important. We are not just rebuilding a business, we are redefining what it means to be successful." As Ethan was escorted out of the room, still shouting incoherent accusations, Olivia felt a wave of conflicting emotions. There stood the man who had shattered her life, now reduced to a pathetic shadow of his former self. A part of her wanted to feel satisfaction, triumph, even joy at his downfall. But instead she felt only a reinforced determination to create something meaningful out of all the pain and betrayal. Regaining her composure, Olivia directly addressed the interruption. "What we just witnessed is a powerful reminder of the human cost of corruption and greed. This is not just about numbers on a spreadsheet or declining stock prices. Real lives are affected. Dreams are destroyed. That is why our transformation of Sinclair Enterprises goes beyond profit margins. It's about restoring trust, not just with our shareholders, but with every employee, customer, and community member who depends on us." As Olivia concluded her presentation, outlining concrete plans for corporate transparency, social responsibility, and ethical innovation, the energy in the room had completely shifted. The initial skepticism had given way to a sense of possibility, even hope. Journalists who had come expecting to report on the collapse of an empire now found themselves writing about a story of rebirth and redemption. During the Q&A session, Olivia faced every question with honesty and clarity, refusing to shy away from even the most difficult inquiries about her past or the challenges the company would face. Her transparency and vision for the future seemed to captivate even the most cynical reporters. By the time the press conference ended, Olivia stepped down from the podium to a storm of camera flashes and applause. She allowed herself a moment of reflection. The road ahead was still long and filled with obstacles, but for the first time in a long while she felt true hope for the future. This was no longer just about revenge or personal justice. It was about building something meaningful and lasting from the ashes of her old life. As she made her way toward the exit, Olivia paused briefly beside Rosa, who was waiting with a proud smile and tears in her eyes. In a move that surprised the reporters present, Olivia embraced Rosa warmly, whispering, "A heartfelt thank you." This public display of gratitude for the woman who had saved her from the landfill not only humanized Olivia in the eyes of the media, but also served as a powerful reminder of her extraordinary journey. Stepping outside to face a throng of reporters and photographers, Olivia Sinclair was ready for the next chapter of her life. The revenge she had once sought had transformed into something far greater, something far more meaningful. Now her focus was on using her experience and position to bring real, lasting change, not just to her company but to the business world as a whole. The sun was setting over Manhattan, casting a golden glow over the skyscrapers, as if the city itself was celebrating this new beginning. For Olivia, it was more than just the end of a day. It was the dawn of a new era, both for herself and for Sinclair Enterprises. With Rosa by her side and a clear vision of the future ahead, Olivia was ready to turn her story of survival into a legacy of change and hope. The months following the dramatic press conference were a whirlwind of activity for Olivia Sinclair and the newly reformed Sinclair Enterprises. The corporate world watched with a mix of skepticism and fascination as Olivia implemented, one by one, the bold changes she had promised. The company's transformation was not without challenges. There was resistance from conservative shareholders, skepticism from market analysts, and even sabotage from competitors who feared the disruptive potential of Sinclair's new policies. Yet Olivia faced every obstacle with the same determination and resilience that had carried her through her darkest months. She knew that every decision she made, every reform she implemented, was not just about reclaiming control of her company. It was about redefining the very concept of corporate success in the 21st century. One of Olivia's first and most controversial measures was implementing a profit-sharing program for all employees, from top executives to entry-level workers. This decision, initially criticized by some as financially reckless, quickly proved to be a masterstroke both in terms of employee morale and productivity. Sinclair Enterprises soon gained a reputation as one of the best places to work in New York, attracting top-tier talent and inspiring unprecedented loyalty among its workforce. At the same time, Olivia launched an ambitious environmental sustainability initiative. Sinclair Enterprises not only committed to becoming a carbon-neutral company within 5 years, but also began investing heavily in green technologies and startups focused on environmental solutions. Initially met with skepticism from traditional investors, this move soon began to pay off, positioning Sinclair at the forefront of a rapidly growing market and attracting a new generation of climate-conscious investors. As the company thrived, under her visionary leadership, Olivia never forgot her roots or the lessons she had learned during her time in the landfill. She established the Sinclair Foundation for Opportunity, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing education, vocational training, and job opportunities for the homeless and marginalized communities. Rosa Mendez, the woman who had saved Olivia in her darkest moment, was appointed director of the foundation, bringing her compassion and life experience to guide the organization's mission. Olivia Sinclair's story, her fall and resurgence, became a modern legend, inspiring books, documentaries, and even a Hollywood film. But for Olivia, the true story was not about the drama of her revenge. It was about the lives she was helping to transform through her work. 1 year after reclaiming control of Sinclair Enterprises, Olivia once again stood before a room full of journalists and business analysts. This time, however, the atmosphere was entirely different. There was no skepticism or hostility in the eyes that looked at her, only anticipation and, perhaps, admiration. Olivia stepped up to the podium, her confident yet humble posture a reflection of the transformative journey she had undertaken. "A year ago," she began, her voice clear and firm, "I stood before you as a woman seeking justice and redemption. Today I stand here not just as the CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, but as someone deeply committed to the idea that business can and must be a force for good in the world." Olivia then proceeded to outline the remarkable results of her first year at the helm. Sinclair Enterprises had not only regained its market position but was consistently outperforming analysts' expectations. More importantly, the company was setting new standards in corporate responsibility, environmental sustainability, and workplace equity. But the numbers on our balance sheets, as impressive as they may be, do not tell the whole story, Olivia continued, her voice carrying an undercurrent of emotion. The true measure of our success lies in the lives we touch, the communities we help rebuild, and the more sustainable and equitable future we are working to create. At that moment, Olivia paused, scanning the room until her eyes found Rosa, seated discreetly in the front row. With a warm smile, she continued, "My own journey has taught me that true strength doesn't come from power or wealth, but from compassion, resilience, and the ability to rise even in the face of the most overwhelming adversity. That is the lesson we are striving to embody in every aspect of our business." As Olivia concluded her presentation, outlining even more ambitious plans for Sinclair Enterprises' future, it became clear to everyone in the room that they were witnessing not just the revitalization of a company, but the birth of a new paradigm in business. After the conference, as Olivia walked through the halls of Sinclair's headquarters, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. The memories of her past life, the luxury, the naivety, the betrayal, felt like they belonged to someone else, to another lifetime. The time in the landfill, the struggles, the pain of loss and deception, all of it had transformed into a source of strength and purpose. Reaching her office, Olivia paused for a moment to take in the view of Manhattan from the executive floor windows. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, reminiscent of that fateful day when her life had changed forever. But now, instead of loneliness and despair, Olivia felt only gratitude and determination. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Rosa, bringing the latest reports from the Sinclair Foundation for Opportunity. The two women exchanged warm smiles, a deep and unbreakable bond evident in their eyes. "How are we doing, Rosa?" Olivia asked, genuinely invested in the Foundation's progress. Rosa, tears of pride shimmering in her eyes, began recounting the recent successes: families taken off the streets, young people receiving education and training, entire communities being revitalized. Each story was a testament to the power of second chances, something Olivia understood all too well. As she listened, Olivia felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Her journey, which had begun with a thirst for revenge, had evolved into something far greater and more meaningful. She had not only reclaimed what was rightfully hers, she had discovered a higher purpose for her life and resources. "You know, Rosa," Olivia said softly after the woman finished her report, "there was a time when I thought my story was about loss, betrayal, and revenge. But now I see that it was about finding a strength I never knew I had, about discovering the true meaning of family and purpose." Rosa nodded, understanding completely. "You've turned your pain into something beautiful, mija. Something that is changing lives." The two women stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the city. New York, with all its contradictions, wealth and poverty, opportunity and struggle, felt like a reflection of the world Olivia was now striving to change. "We still have so much work to do," Olivia finally said, her voice filled with determination. Rosa smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Yes, we do. But look how far we've already come." As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, giving way to the twinkling lights of the city that never sleeps, Olivia felt a peace she had never thought possible. Her journey, from luxury to ruin and back again, had not just been about reclaiming what was hers, but about discovering who she truly was and what truly mattered. The empire she had rebuilt was no longer just about power or wealth. It was a platform for change, a force for good. And Olivia Sinclair, once broken and abandoned, was now stronger and more determined than ever to use that platform to make a difference in the world. As she and Rosa prepared for another night of work, planning the future of Sinclair Enterprises and the Foundation, Olivia knew that her true revenge, if it could even be called that anymore, was not in Ethan and Sophia's downfall. It was in the good she could now do, in the lives she was changing, in the positive legacy she was building. The story of Olivia Sinclair, which had begun with betrayal and despair, had become a tale of redemption, purpose, and hope. And while the chapter of her revenge had come to a close, a new, brighter chapter was just beginning, not just for her, but for all those whose lives she would touch in the years to come. 5 years had passed since Olivia Sinclair reclaimed control of Sinclair Enterprises and embarked on her mission to transform not just her company, but the very concept of ethical business and corporate social responsibility. The morning sun bathed the striking glass and steel tower that now served as Sinclair Enterprises' global headquarters, its facade covered in state-of-the-art solar panels, a visible testament to the company's commitment to sustainability. On the 50th floor, Olivia stood before the panoramic window of her office, watching as the city that never sleeps awakened to another day. At 37, she radiated an aura of confidence and serenity that starkly contrasted with the vulnerable young woman she had been just half a decade ago. Her eyes, once shadowed by fear and pain, now shone with a calm determination and the wisdom hard-earned through adversity. A soft knock at the door signaled the arrival of Rosa Mendez, now a respected figure in New York's philanthropic circles. Thanks to her tireless work as director of the Sinclair Foundation for Opportunity, the two women exchanged warm smiles, their bond stronger than ever. "Ready for the big day, mija?" Rosa asked, her voice filled with maternal pride. Olivia nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be, Rosa. It's still hard to believe we've come this far." The big day they referred to was the grand opening of the Sinclair Community Complex, an ambitious project combining affordable housing, vocational training centers, healthcare clinics, and green spaces, all designed to revitalize one of New York's most underserved neighborhoods. It was the culmination of years of hard work, meticulous planning, and an unwavering vision for a more equitable future. As they prepared to leave the office and head to the opening ceremony, Olivia couldn't help but reflect on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. She vividly remembered the dark days in the landfill, the struggle to reclaim her identity and place in the world. Every challenge, every obstacle overcome, had become a lesson, molding her into the leader she had become. Under Olivia's leadership, Sinclair Enterprises had transformed into a global model of ethical and sustainable business. The company not only led its industries in innovation and profitability, but had also set new standards in labor practices, environmental sustainability, and social responsibility. The profit-sharing program Olivia had implemented in her first year as CEO had sparked a wave of similar changes in corporations worldwide. Arriving at the site of the inauguration, Olivia was met with an enthusiastic crowd. Local residents, Sinclair employees, city dignitaries, and journalists had all gathered to witness what many were already calling the Sinclair miracle. As she made her way to the stage, Olivia greeted people, pausing to hear their stories, her eyes welling with tears as she realized the tangible impact of her work. On stage, before thousands of spectators and television cameras, Olivia prepared to deliver her speech. Beside her stood Rosa, key members of her team, and to her surprise and deep emotion, several of the homeless individuals she had met during her months in the landfill, now transformed thanks to the Sinclair Foundation's programs. 5 years ago, Olivia began, her voice clear and filled with emotion. I was in a very different place, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. I had lost everything, or so I thought. She paused, her eyes meeting Rosa's in the crowd. What I discovered in those dark days was that our true wealth isn't in our bank accounts or the titles we hold. It's in our ability to rise, to help others, to create meaningful change in the world around us. As Olivia continued her speech, outlining the resources and opportunities the new complex would provide to the community, she couldn't help but think of Ethan and Sophia. Her ex-husband and his accomplice had been convicted for their crimes and were now serving prison sentences. Olivia had realized that the revenge she once sought had not brought her the peace she expected. Instead, It was through forgiveness. Not just of them, but of herself, and the commitment to creating something positive from her experience that she had found true healing and purpose. This complex, Olivia concluded, her voice thick with emotion, is more than just a set of buildings. It is a symbol of hope, of second chances, of our collective ability to create change when we come together with a common purpose. It is living proof that our greatest adversities can become our greatest strengths if we choose to use our experiences to lift others up. As Olivia cut the ribbon, officially inaugurating the Sinclair Community Complex, the crowd erupted in applause. Colorful fireworks exploded in the sky, painting the New York morning with brilliant hues, reflecting the hope and promise the moment represented. Later that evening, after the celebrations and interviews had ended, Olivia found herself back in her office, gazing at the illuminated cityscape. Rosa joined her, carrying 2 glasses of champagne for a private toast. To second chances, Rosa proposed, raising her glass. And to making a difference, Olivia added, a serene smile on her lips. As the 2 women looked out over the city, Olivia felt a profound sense of fulfillment and peace. Her journey, which had begun with pain and betrayal, had transformed into something beautiful and meaningful. She had not only rebuilt her life and her company, but had also found a greater purpose. The empire she now commanded was no longer just about business and wealth. It was about hope and transformation. With every life touched, every community revitalized, Olivia felt she was honoring her uncle's legacy and creating something that would endure beyond her. As the clock struck midnight, signaling the start of a new day, Olivia Sinclair knew that her story was far from over. In fact, she felt as though it was only just beginning. With Rosa by her side and a clear vision of the future, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, always striving to build a more just, sustainable, and compassionate world. The revenge that had once fueled her had evolved into something far more powerful, an unwavering commitment to positive change. And in that transformation, Olivia had found not just redemption, but a true reason to live. As the lights of New York sparkled like stars below, Olivia smiled, grateful for the path that had led her here and eager for the future she would help shape. Her journey from luxury to ruin and back again had not been the end, but merely the beginning of something truly extraordinary. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this powerful story. Olivia Sinclair's journey shows us that even in the toughest situations, we can find the strength to rise again and make a difference. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments below, share a moment in your life when you overcame a big challenge. How did that experience transform you? Your story might inspire someone who's going through a tough time right now. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next inspiring stories. See you next time.